Every nation on earth believes it governs itself. Presidents give speeches, parliaments vote, and flags rise over proud capitals. But beneath the pageantry of democracy and the chaos of politics, there exists another power, one that never runs for office, never stands on a podium, and never leaves when the votes are counted. It doesn't wave flags. It prints them. This power doesn't seek attention. It doesn't need to. It owns the stage. From Washington to London, Beijing to Brussels, the same invisible hands design the policies, fund the wars, and decide what tomorrow's economy will look like. It is not one company or one billionaire. It's an industry, a web of financial influence so deeply intertwined with government that the two have become indistinguishable. And yet we still call them separate. We call one public service and the other private enterprise. But what if those words have lost their meaning? What if the very system meant to serve the people has been quietly repurposed to serve capital itself? This is not a conspiracy, it's an accounting. A trail of influence written in campaign donations, revolving doors, and the quiet language of debt. To understand who truly governs the world, we have to follow the money, not just where it flows, but who controls its current. By the end of this story, one unsettling truth will emerge. Governments don't regulate the financial industry, they depend on it to exist. Every empire in history has had its backbone. Rome had its legions, Britain had its navy. Ours has its markets. In the modern world, power isn't measured in armies or territory, but in credit, the ability to borrow from the future. And that credit is supplied by a tightly knit ecosystem of institutions, investment banks, rating agencies, lobbying firms, and global corporations. They form what economists politely call the financial sector. But behind that neutral term lies something closer to an empire without borders, one that controls governments not through force, but through dependence. Consider this. Every government debt, every public project, every social promise is financed by selling bonds, IOUs to investors. Those investors are not the people. They are funds, corporations, and financial intermediaries who lend sovereignty in exchange for interest. In other words, governments are not just political entities, they are clients of capital. The illusion of independence remains. Prime ministers debate budgets, central banks announce policies, but the boundaries of those decisions are drawn by the invisible line of market confidence. Step outside it and your currency collapses. Defy it and capital flees overnight. The market punishes rebellion faster than any coup ever could. It didn't begin this way. In the aftermath of World War II, nations sought peace through economic cooperation. The Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944 built the foundations of the global financial system. The IMF, the World Bank, the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. It was meant to stabilize economies and prevent another collapse like the Great Depression. But over time, what began as a safety net became a spider's web. Corporations expanded across borders, banks became global. And slowly, the institutions meant to guide the world economy began to own it. By the 1970s, as nations abandoned the gold standard, money itself lost its anchor. From then on, value became a matter of confidence, and those who controlled confidence controlled the world. Financial markets learned something extraordinary. They didn't need to wait for governments to change policy, they could force them to. When currencies fell or bond yields spiked, leaders trembled. When Wall Street panicked, parliaments reacted. And in every crisis that followed, from Latin America's debt collapse to the global meltdown of 2008, the same industry that caused the chaos was summoned to fix it. Each rescue tightened the bond. Each bailout deepened the dependence. Today, the relationship between finance and government resembles a feedback loop. One feeds the other, endlessly. Governments borrow from markets to fund policies that protect the markets that lend to them. Regulators are drawn from the very firms they're meant to oversee, only to return to them later with new titles and higher pay. Lobbyists write the laws that define their own legality. It's a cycle that ensures continuity, not democracy. The language of modern governance has become financial. Growth targets, deficit ceilings, market stability. These are not moral ideas, they are monetary constraints. And yet, they determine everything from healthcare budgets to environmental policies. When a government proposes something that threatens profit, say, stronger labor rights or higher corporate taxes, the market responds instantly. A few digits change on a screen, and billions vanish from national wealth. The message is clear: do not disturb the system. But this system isn't invisible because it's secret. It's invisible because it has been normalized. We have built a civilization where power no longer wears a crown, it signs a contract. The secret industry that owns every government doesn't need to seize control. It already has it through dependency, through credit, through the quiet assumption that money is the measure of reality itself. And the more governments try to escape this truth, the deeper they sink into it. Because in the modern economy, to govern is to borrow, and to borrow is to obey. It began, as most empires do, with good intentions. The 20th century promised freedom, free markets, free trade, free societies. But freedom has a cost, and it was measured not in gold or silver, but in debt. Debt became the invisible machinery of the modern world, the lifeblood of economies, the quiet chain linking every nation to the same source of control. After the oil crises of the 1970s, Western economies faced a terrifying question: how do you maintain growth without real productivity? The answer was ingenious and devastating. They financialized everything. Factories gave way to financial products. Trade gave way to speculation. We stopped making things and started making money from money. And as financial markets swelled, so did their influence. Investment banks evolved from intermediaries into architects. They no longer simply funded industries, they created them, shaping entire sectors through mergers, takeovers, and valuations. Hedge funds learned to bet on the rise and fall of entire nations, treating political stability as just another tradable asset. And multinational corporations became governments in everything but name, setting wages, designing trade policy, even influencing environmental regulation. The institutions meant to guard democracy quietly outsourced it. Behind the polished glass towers and corporate logos, a shadow bureaucracy emerged, rating agencies that decide which countries are safe to invest in, lobbying groups that craft the laws they later exploit, consultants who advise both regulators and the companies being regulated. This wasn't corruption in the old sense, it was integration. A system so vast and interconnected that no single person could be blamed, and no government could escape. The lines between private and public blurred until they disappeared entirely. By the 1990s, globalization had finished what Bretton Woods began. Capital could now move anywhere, instantly, invisibly, without borders. Corporations shifted profits through tax havens. Governments competed for investment by lowering regulations. And the power once held by citizens, through their votes, through their labor, slowly migrated to shareholders and balance sheets. Every policy became a negotiation with capital. How much freedom could a country afford before the market punished it? When the 2008 financial crisis hit, that question became inescapable. The collapse revealed the system's true nature. The same industry that had gambled the world's savings was declared too big to fail. Trillions were printed overnight to rescue the institutions that had created the disaster. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens lost homes, jobs, and futures, all to preserve a system that had failed them. But the message wasn't just economic, it was psychological. It told the world, in no uncertain terms, who was really in charge. Because when failure becomes impossible, power becomes absolute. Since then, every crisis, from sovereign debt meltdowns to pandemic bailouts, has reinforced that hierarchy. Governments manage crises, finance profits from them. And each time, the system grows more complex, more opaque, and more dependent on the same fragile confidence it manipulates. There is a strange irony at the heart of this empire. The financial system can control governments, but it cannot control itself. It can dictate interest rates, influence wars, decide the fate of currencies, yet it trembles at the mere whisper of uncertainty. Every boom is built on borrowed faith, and every collapse on lost belief. Money, after all, is not real. It is a story, a shared myth written in contracts and balance sheets. And the storytellers have begun to believe their own fiction. When markets panic, governments act not as leaders, but as servants to calm them. They cut interest rates, print money, open credit lines, all to preserve the illusion that the system is stable. But stability bought with fear is not stability. It is dependency disguised as order. And as technology accelerates, that order grows brittle. Algorithms now move trillions in milliseconds, guided by no conscience, no accountability. Artificial intelligence manages portfolios larger than the GDP of nations, while real human economies crumble beneath inequality and automation. The system has become too vast to understand, too automated to control, and too profitable to question. It doesn't need to conquer governments. It is the environment in which they exist. Here lies the forbidden truth. Governments no longer serve citizens. They serve the stability of capital. Every policy, every reform, every bailout, all orbit the same gravitational center, the preservation of the financial system itself. It's not a conspiracy of men in smoke-filled rooms. It's a logic that has rewritten democracy into a market equation. A logic so powerful that even revolutions now depend on the approval of investors. When citizens protest, governments listen. But when markets protest, governments obey. That is the essence of the secret industry, not domination, but design. A self-reinforcing mechanism that ensures power flows upward, indefinitely. We call it capitalism. But capitalism, as it exists today, no longer produces, it extracts. Not from resources, but from the future. From labor yet to be done, from taxes yet to be paid, from generations yet unborn. The greatest empire in human history has no flag, no anthem, no army, only balance sheets. And its reach extends into every government, every budget, every crisis. It owns nothing, and through that it owns everything. We often speak of freedom, political, economic, personal. But in a world governed by financial dependence, freedom is just another line item in the budget. Governments pretend to act independently, yet their every move is priced in the markets before it happens. Economies rise and fall not by votes, but by algorithms. And people, the very reason these systems were built, have become background noise in the grand machinery of capital. History will not remember this as an age of nations, but as the age of finance. An era where the instruments of wealth became the instruments of rule. And when future generations ask how it happened, how humanity traded sovereignty for solvency, they will find no single villain. Only a pattern of trust misplaced, of power abstracted, of systems that grew beyond human control. The most dangerous form of control is not tyranny. It is dependency. And we are all dependent now, not on leaders or laws, but on the silent rhythm of the markets that decide our fate. We think we've built an economy, but in truth, it has built us.